The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is February 24th, 2024, and for all you history nerds out there, you all know what that means. Today marks the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Like full-scale invasion, not the proxy war in the Donbass, but the actual invasion of Ukraine by the Russian army. It's literally now been 2 damn years, and I am getting old. I was like 22 years old when this shit happened. Like, I was like junior or so in college, but now I am a senior, and I'm getting ready to graduate soon. And this war is still ongoing. And the map has not really, for the most part, in a big way, changed since last year. So I want to make this sort of personal, okay? This video. Because it's sort of like a retrospective video. When the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, I was at home in my comfy house, okay? I remember it being a sort of chilly but not too cold of a day. And I recall, like, just seeing all this stuff on Twitter about what was going on. And I was like, what? Is Russia really invading Ukraine? Because I want to disclose this, okay, people? Before the Russo-Ukrainian War, I was really big into the Middle Eastern conflicts. The Syrian Civil War, the Iraqi conflict with ISIS, the Libyan Civil War, the Yemeni Civil War, the war in Afghanistan, etc. I was into all that shit, okay? And even a little bit into the civil war in Myanmar or Burma. Now, of all the conflicts, I did not expect the Russians to actually invade Ukraine. I thought it was inconceivable. I thought the Russians were not that insane to actually go through with it. But they did. They did. The Russians invaded Ukraine, and I remember one of the very first things I saw was a CNN reporter, like a correspondent, literally on the ground, not too far from Kiev, and he saw these guys armed with AK-12s or AK-74Ms with white armbands, just casually walking around, carrying their ammunition around, like in chest or something. It was crazy. And that's how I knew shit was for real. And then you saw all the videos coming out of Russian tanks spray painted with Z on them. Like, just basically rolling across the entire country. And then you had the Russians taking control of Melitopol. Then you had them taking control of Energodar, Berdyansk, Tokmak. I could go on. And them, of course, sieging Mariupol. And then it really hit the peak when they took the city of Kherson. When they crossed the Dnieper River. They took the city of Kherson and nearly reached and took Mykolaiv from Ukraine. And had Mykolaiv fell to Russia, I think it would have set up the stage for a possible invasion of Odessa too. But they didn't take Mykolaiv. They got repelled. And they lost the battle of Mykolaiv. Now, if I'm correct, okay, the Russians did, in fact, advance as far as here in Mykolaiv, like by road. They were actually here in this town. I cannot pronounce its name for shit. But they were this far into Mykolaiv Oblast. This far. And then they got pushed back. And had they taken it, they would have found a way to get to Odessa. Because there would have been little to no river crossings. Little to none. But Ukrainians got really lucky because the Russians were really, really cocky that day. Or during that time, during February and March. As I said, they got really cocky. But as time passed, things began to get clearer. The fog of war began to dissipate. And or evaporate. I don't know what the correct wording is, but basically what happened was the Russians got pushed back from Mykolaiv. And then, yeah, basically it just got stuck. And then they focused on controlling everyday life in Kherson City, even though they kept on getting harassed by the Ukrainians there from time to time. And yeah, then you got all these people gathering in the city square, which was right here, protesting with their Ukrainian flags and seeing the Russian soldiers just standing there quietly, being ordered by their commanders not to do anything, like not to shoot them. And then, like, one day, the protesters, I think, got too close to them, and the Russians then start shooting at them. And then, yeah, you got these people in Kherson all chanting, "Domoy, Domoy, Domoy," which means go home in Russian. "Domoy, Domoy." You got all these people, again, protesting. And yeah, the Russian soldiers were like, what the hell is going on here? They're not green as his liberators or anything like that. They were completely baffled. It just shows you how much things have changed in Ukraine ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. They all believed that Russia was the cause of their problems. Not their own country, but Russia. So, but yeah, they took control of Kherson, and then, yeah, I remember them, I think at one point maybe getting close to taking Orkiv or Orkov. And yeah, Russians were advancing closely to Zaporozhye city, but they weren't able to get that far again, though they took around 70% of the province from Ukraine. And Russia also easily took over majority of the Lugansk Oblast as well. And took around like 30 or so percent of Kharkiv. I also recall Russians doing quite well in Sumy Oblast, but they were really struggling in Chernigov and Kiev. They were getting their ass kicked. Mainly because they didn't have enough manpower, they didn't have enough, like, equipment or ammunition or anything like that. They didn't have anything. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say. But yeah, I literally remember it all. And I remember, like, my position on the whole invasion was, okay, this shit is fucking crazy. But we need to calm down for a moment, folks, because we need to wait and see what happens later down the line, because we don't know how shit is going to get worse after this. And what do you know? People then started basically shitting on Russia for invading Ukraine, which I can understand, because Ukraine is an internationally recognized sovereign state all over the world. Even Russia recognized it after the fall of the Soviet Union. And, yeah, the people were really, really angry. They were really angry. And it was justified, too, because people sort of, and there were even some people, like, that supported the Syrian government in their war against the Syrian jihadist groups, or, like, foreign jihadist groups, that is, like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. You had those people getting very conflicted, because Russia was supposed to pose itself as the anti-imperialist country. The country that everybody would look up to whenever America was bullying them. And because we all know how the invasion of Iraq was, it was a total disaster, even though we initially succeeded, but it got worse over time. And then, yeah, you saw the whole thing with Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, whatever. But this war broke the illusion that Russia was anti-imperialist, arguably. They still want to conquer. And that is Ukraine. From Russia's point of view, from what I can gather as of right now, they don't really see Ukraine as a real country. They see it as a Mickey Mouse state, whose independence was a huge mistake, and is an eyesore on the map, which is very debatable. But yeah, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was internationally condemned by most countries. Again, I understand that, because Russia literally is not known for doing shit like this, but here they were. They did it. But yeah, it left a lot of people conflicted. And I was conflicted too. Now, I'm not going to openly state who I support in this conflict, at least on YouTube because I don't want to get banned or get like disciplined or so, because I know YouTube is very sensitive about this topic. So I'll just say it right now. It's not really possible to be neutral in this war. This is definitely the kind of war where you definitely have to pick a side. Rather if you're pro-Russia or pro-Ukraine/NATO. I mean, I really want to be honest with you guys with who I support, but I just can't. Because I'll get in trouble. There's a lot of pro-Russia people got punished by YouTube for allegedly spreading misinformation. I mean, it sucks. It really does. I mean, giving out your stance on something like this is nothing compared to like spreading disinformation about election 2020 or COVID or anything like that, or spreading hate speech around. Like, giving a stance on something is just, I don't agree with banning someone over that shit. I just don't. And as I said, a lot of people were conflicted on the when the war first started, but I feel like nowadays I've really figured out what my true stance on this war was, and I'm glad I've come to the conclusion on that, because now I know who I think is the lesser of the two evils here. Because when you really dig deep, like dig really deep into this whole thing, you see that Russia and Ukraine are really not that much different from each other. If you want to talk about like sort of the actions they've done in the whole war and the things that they do, and I mean, both countries are arguably a dictatorship where they imprison journalists, they kill people for speaking out, they forcefully mobilize people. Well, Ukrainians mostly do that, not Russians as much. I hear the Russians recruits are, or at least soldiers, are all mostly volunteers. They're not really forcefully mobilized. But yeah, you got people being sent to the gulags, religions getting persecuted, protests being shut down. I mean, you fucking name it. Russia and Ukraine, from a government perspective, like government-wise, like the way they do things, I don't really see that much of a big difference. Because if Vladimir Putin banned the Moscow Times, then Ukraine has likely banned Russia Today. So you cannot claim yourself to be a democracy and just simply ban certain, like speech, okay? And that's why I don't want to hear people calling Ukraine a democracy, because it's not. It's, at best, a republic, and at worst, an authoritarian dictatorship, like under a military junta. That's what Ukraine really is. It is not. And I repeat, it is not a democracy. Just like how America is not a democracy. We're a republic that just votes for our representatives. That's not a direct democracy. If we were a direct democracy, we would directly vote on the laws that are literally enforced on us. It's that simple. But we're not. We're a republic. We vote for the people that we hope would pass those laws for us. It's that simple. So therefore, we're not a democracy. And neither is Ukraine. But yeah, that shit was wild. And then, then I remember seeing the fall of, let's see, I swear, it's like a town, like, not far from Mariupol. Oh, here it is. Volnovka. It was the sizable settlement here that the Russians now control, and that was basically the final piece of the puzzle that they needed to besiege Mariupol. And yeah, I remember watching the whole battle Mariupol. That was a crazy, crazy ride. And I also remember watching the fall of both Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. That was really insane to watch. In fact, those went by quite quickly when compared to like the recent battles like in Bakhmut or Artyomovsk and Avdiivka. Those took forever. Same with Mariinka too. They all took forever. And I even remember the whole Kharkiv counteroffensive. Like, the Russians used to basically control everything here, but then they collapsed, and then they have to give up everything, which was a huge tactical disadvantage for them. and then they lost Liman, and Ukrainians got really close to being back at Crimea, which would have been a huge disaster for Russia. But then Ukrainians were not able to push any further after that, and now Russians are pushing back as of right now, and they're nearing this whole area here. So, but yeah, I was very conflicted during the initial invasion, but as I said, by now I've made my stances clear. And without further ado, let's get a bit to the news, okay? So, the big one, Robotyne is half of it, if not most of it by now, is back under Russian control. Holy crap. And it was quick too. Ukrainians literally collapsed in Robotyne. And I'm expecting the town to fall pretty soon. Though I'm not going to say immediately, but it will fall eventually. Like, it won't be long from now. Like, Russians now already control like 50% of it. I wouldn't be surprised if Ukrainians are withdrawing due to the alien defenses there. And because they lost so much resources in the area. Because in this whole area here, in this pocket, they lost a lot of NATO-made equipment. They lost a lot of troops. And wasted a lot of ammunition. Eventually, this was going to come back to bite them, and it has. I won't be surprised if the Russians launch an offensive on Orikhiv, because if they do, nothing but disaster awaits for the armed forces of Ukraine, especially in their current form. No aid from Washington is coming anytime soon, and we're still like a week or two away from Congress coming back from break. And the election in the United States is not that far either. And a lot of people are turning against the idea of funding Ukraine. And as a result, more defenses are going to collapse. And the Russians just recently captured this little settlement here on the road to Ugledar, Pobjida, and have taken also a good chunk of Novomykhailivka. And they are also pushing further in the vicinity of Pisky too. Severn and Latso-Chikne have now all fallen to Russia. So Avdiivka is almost, if not now, completely locked up. Literally all the places, and oh yeah, and Stepovets has finally fallen too. So literally all of the heavily defended areas of the armed forces of Ukraine have now been defeated in the vicinity of Avdiivka. So the Donetsk suburbs are almost completely secured. But now, there's one last thing they got to do. And this is going to be very difficult. Krasnorivka, which is right here. It looks pretty medium-sized, but it's doable. Looks doable. It definitely looks a little bigger than Avdiivka, I will say. But, yeah, this is still on the 2014 defense line here. So yeah, it's going to be a little hard for Russians to take it, but considering all the problems the AFU has been having as of late, I won't be shocked if this town falls next. So yeah. And then we got the news coming in from Artyomovsk. Russians are continuing to advance. They have now taken a small chunk of Ivanivsky, which would be huge if they take the whole village, because then they'll have an open route to Konstantinivka, sorta, and also Chasiv Yar. Now, if they take Chasiv Yar, at least Chasiv Yar, Russians will have the firing, position advantage on the rest of the AFU-controlled Donbas. So they can shell to death Konstantinivka, Druzhkivka, Slavyansk, and the Kramatorsk. I'm also expecting the Russians to start an offensive on Siversk too, eventually. I mean, they're eventually going to have to do it to secure Artyomovsk for good. But as far as I'm concerned, the Russians' prospects in the Donbass are getting better every day. And with Avdiivka, literally the Donetsk suburbs now literally out of the way, I honestly don't see how the Ukrainians can continue to really keep fighting. Because here's the thing. I don't know if the American aid will pass, but let's just say it does. Is it too little too late? And also take into consideration the F-16s that Zelensky has been really hyping about. Is it too little too late? because those F-16s are not going to come to Ukraine for another 3 to 4 more months. Okay? I don't know what the map's going to look like by then, but my gut is telling me this map's going to look drastically different in the next couple of months. I don't know how bad it's going to be, but we just have to wait and see, my friends. But yeah, that is my personal perspective on where I was and how I felt about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And also, that was the news for today's video. So I hope all of you guys have a great day. Stay safe out there and have a good one. Peace out. Bye-bye.